Oh my goodness. Let's talk about this Dabo Swinney Clemson press conference. Because if you watched it live or you've seen the highlights or you've seen tweets about it, you know that this wasn't some generic coach rant. Dabo can certainly go off the rails at times and make everybody question what the heck he's talking about. This was none of that. It was very controlled, it was very detailed, and it was obviously very intentional. Before we get into Ole Miss and Pete Golding and Luke Ferrelli or tampering, let me give you the quiet part out loud. This press conference wasn't really about Ole Miss. That's what we'll talk about when we get to the end of this thing. Dabo didn't stumble into this moment. He didn't get emotional. He didn't go off script. He showed up with receipts. And when a coach like Dabo Swinney, who doesn't really take a targeted approach like this, when that guy decides to read a timeline out loud, that's when you know that something bigger is happening. This wasn't really outrage. It was a warning shot, not just to Ole Miss, but to all of college football. How this all started. Let's start at the beginning because that matters. Before Luke Ferrelli ever visited Clemson, his dad told Dabo that Ole Miss was a mess, unorganized, disjointed, not impressive. Dabo even said that he gave Ole Miss some grace in that thought because Pete Golding was a new coach. He wasn't looking to pile on. He chalked it up to growing pains. Dabo had been there. And Dabo's exact tone here matters. He wasn't salty. He was almost appreciative. He said he was glad the Ferrellis could then come to Clemson to see what a real operation looked like. And that really should have been the end of it. However, it wasn't. How about when this crossed the line? Clemson's GM, Jordan Sorrells, eventually reached out to Ole Miss's GM and told them to cease and desist. Very clear. He was very professional. And the response from Ole Miss's side, according to Dabo, the Ole Miss GM said, Pete Golding does what he does. That line matters because it's not denial. It's not a surprise. It's resignation to the fact of, I have no control over what the head coach does. There was a text that blew this wide open, and it goes from uncomfortable to indefensible. Dabo says that Pete Golding texted Luke Ferrelli while Luke was in class. Not while he was in the portal, not while he was on a visit, not while he was exploring options, not unsure of what he was going to do in class. And the message? I know you're signed, but what is your buyout? He followed that up by sending him a picture of a $1 million contract. Let that sink in for a minute. That's not some kind of a gray area. That's not misunderstanding. That's what Dabo called tampering 301. And he's right. This wasn't a back channel rumor or third-party whisper through an agent. This was a head coach directly contacting a signed player during a school day. And it didn't stop there, according to Swinney. Ole Miss kept pushing. The offer then became 2 years, $2 million. Pete Golding kept communicating. The pressure stayed on. And here's the part that Dabo made sure everyone heard. Ferrelli kept telling Clemson that he was going to stay over and over again. Meanwhile, Golding kept pushing. That's why Dabo said he has a play-by-play of everything. Texts, receipts, timing, escalation. This isn't Clemson guessing at something. This is all very well documented. What about once Luke entered the portal? Well, once he officially gone back in, Dabo didn't go nuclear. He followed the chain. He called Graham Neff. He called the ACC commissioner, who then called Greg Sankey and others. He wasn't someone who was panicking. He was somebody who was confident that he was right. Dabo didn't mince words when he called this total hypocrisy. He said, I will not let someone flat out tamper with my program. And this might have been the most underrated line of the whole press conference. He said, this doesn't need to be a 3-month or 3-week investigation. This should take 3 days, unless Ole Miss is lying. That's not hyperbole. That's a challenge. The quote that I think everybody will remember is when Dabo dropped a one-liner that instantly went viral. He said, this is like having an affair on your honeymoon. And look, that is dramatic, but it also perfectly captured his point. This wasn't subtle. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't business as usual. It was brazen. We see all the time. Guys will commit to a program through the portal, and before they've signed or officially enrolled, maybe they get messages from coaches, or maybe they set up another visit and go off somewhere else, even after they've committed. But once they're already in classes, it's a different story. Here's where the press conference turned from something that was just about Clemson versus Ole Miss into something bigger. Dabo said multiple coaches have reached out privately, telling him the same thing has happened to them. The same tactics, the same pressure, and the same silence from their players or signees. And Dabo has basically said, enough. Either come out publicly and say it, or stop pretending you're upset behind closed doors. That's not necessarily a shot at Ole Miss. That's a shot at the entire sport. Let's be clear here. Everything Dabo laid out, if it's accurate, Ole Miss crossed the line. Pete Golding texting signed players in a class, sending contract pictures, pushing after being told to stop, that's not defensible. But here's where the conversation needs to grow up. This is happening everywhere. Ole Miss is not alone. It's happening all over the country. Everyone knows it. We all hear about the Duke situation, the things happening at LSU and elsewhere. Everybody whispers about it, but very few people, unlike Dabo Swinney, will say it out loud. The real issue, though today the focus is on Ole Miss, is not on one program. The issue is that there are rules with no teeth. The NCAA and all of these colleges, I might add, are bigger parts of the problem. None of them want to see these athletes become employees. None of these institutions want collective bargaining. None of these entities want to create enforceable contracts. So instead, we live in this gray, weird world where players are not employees, schools aren't protected, coaches can operate in the shadows, and everyone pretends that this is amateurism. At the end of the day, it's not. And until that changes, this will continue to happen. Dabo started reading his plan to fix college football at the end of the presser. And the first thing he talked about was the calendar, because the timing is insane. Signing days, portal windows, playoffs, classes, all overlapping. And chaos fills in the gaps. So here's the part I told you to remember from the beginning. The press conference wasn't really about Luke Ferrelli. It wasn't really about Ole Miss. It wasn't really even about Pete Golding. It was about forcing college football and the powers that be to stop pretending. Dabo didn't do this to win a PR battle. He did it to drag the problem into daylight. Because once it's in public, you can't ignore it anymore. And that's what made this press conference different. It wasn't anger. It wasn't the quotes. It was the intention behind it. College football and these major universities and the NCAA and the CSC can either fix this or they can keep letting everyone else cheat and then argue about it loudly. And Dabo just dared the entire sport to pick a side on this. Let me know your thoughts down below. This is one of the crazier things I've ever seen. Dabo gets a ton of flack about things he said about the portal and NIL and the way that college football is going. But I think what we can all agree, Ole Miss fan, Clemson fan, Miami fan, Florida State fan, doesn't matter. It is a complete mess right now. And hopefully, when more and more of this comes to light, we can get some kind of resolution to it and save the sport that we love. Appreciate you guys for tuning into ACC Football Addiction. Make sure you are subscribed below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. We'll see you on the next time.